using Microsoft Excel to write SAS code. So a lot of the time when we write SAS code, a lot of what we do is repetitive. By that I don't mean that the SAS code itself is doing something repetitive. That's what SAS does. I mean that the lines of code themselves are fairly similar. So that's where Excel can help out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through an example. So it's a fictional example that I've made up just to demonstrate the idea. So the idea is fairly simple. The example is fairly simple, but the idea I think is quite powerful. This is something that I've done ever since I started using SAS. I thought everybody did it, but kind of chatting with people, it turns out that very few people actually do this and realize how much time it can save them. Okay, so in our example, imagine you've been sent a programming plan. So programming plans can come in lots of different formats. So obviously we need to get that into Excel. So if you've received it in Excel, great. If it comes in Word or something else, they're usually in tabular format if it's information about fields or data sets. So you can get it into Excel and then you can start working with it. So imagine in our programming plan we've got the name, length, type, format, and label of each one of our, say, 1,000 or so fields that we need to derive. How can we then initialize and derive each one of those variables in 8 hours and look really flash? So first of all, to initialize the variables, the best way to do it is probably using the attribute statement. So to construct the attribute statement in Excel using a formula, Excel has the ability to concatenate text strings using the ampersand operator. So basically, you start off with equals ATTRIB, which starts off your attribute statement, and then the field name itself, the length of the length equals before you do the length, and then a bit of logic there. So basically says if the type is a character, then include a $, otherwise do nothing, because it's the difference between numeric and character lengths. The length itself, another bit of logic there that says if the format isn't blank, then put format equals and the format itself, otherwise don't do anything. And then finally label equals and the label itself and this semicolon. Now once you've created the first formula, you can then fill that down and you get all of your attribute statements for your 1,000 fields, which you can then paste into your SAS code editor. And ta-da, you've then created a blank data set with 1,000 fields in that all have the right length, type, format, and label, and you've done it in 2 minutes instead of several hours if you wanted to actually type out the code. Okay, so that's what your attribute statements would look like after you've filled them down, which you can then copy and paste them into your SAS code editor. Macro invocations. Okay, so how are you going to then derive each one of your derived fields in your massive data set? So one of the easiest ways to do something multiple times in SAS is to use the SAS macro language. So imagine again that we have our programming plan, and our programming plan contains the criteria to be used to derive each one of our 1,000 fields. So the criteria there is written in English language, and it's each one says gives you the name of the data set to use and the where clause to use to extract the data. So how do we extract that from the source data set and the where clause from the programming plan? So we can use that using the search function in Excel. So that's the macro that we're going to be using. So the macro that's going to derive each one of the fields takes the field name, which we see there in column A, and the source data set and the where clause that are both in column B that we're going to extract using the search function. So it's quite a simple macro. It's just a simple example to kind of show you the idea. Just highlighting them there. Okay, so to extract ampersand source, or what you're going to put in the macro variable source. So where is source? So to me, source appears like it's the second word in column B. So to find the second word, I start off by looking for the first space, just using search, searching for a space in B2, starting at position 1. And where does it end? It actually ends at the second space. So how do we find the second space? We use search again But in place of 1, where we were starting at position 1 looking for the first space, we use the first formula again so that we start at the position of the first space looking for the second space. Okay? And that gives us the second space. We can then use the mid function, and we're taking the midpoint of column B, we're searching for the first space, which is our initial point, and we're then taking the position of the second space minus the position of the first space, because the way that mid works, it's the number of characters along, it's not the second position, it's your starting position and then the number of characters that you need to read along. And then you can extract xlib.date for the first one, and then you can fill that down, and that gives you the source data set for each one of your 1,000 fields. So how do you extract the where clause? In a similar way, where does where appear? It appears after the word where, so we search for where. Where does it end? It ends at the end of the field, so we're going to use the length, and then we can use the mid function again. But notice there I've got a +6. The reason for the +6 is because we're shuttling past the word where, because we don't want that in our where clause. We're going to have to strip that out using +6, so we start after that with our mid function, and then we can extract for the first one, date type equals 1. Again, you then fill that down, and you get your where criteria for each one of your 1,000 derived fields. So you've now got your name of your field, you had that to start with, your source data set, and your where clause. So you can then construct your macro invocation. How do you construct the macro invocation? You just do it in a similar way to the way that you did your attribute statement. So you start off with the name of the macro itself, and then the name of the field, which is A2, which has gone off the side of the screen, and then a comma, and then the source data set, and then %str to suppress any special characters which happen to be in our where clause, and then the where clause itself, and the closing brackets, and the semicolon, which gives us our macro invocation. And then once you've filled that down, you get all of your macro invocations. Now, one final thing that I would like to talk about is comments. So if you've got a macro and you're deriving 1,000 fields, it's quite nice to have comments. So you're probably best to take that from the dataset specification, because that's where you've got it from, and it's nice to include that information. So a nice easy way to include some comments is just to take your the name of your field and the actual English language where criteria that you stripped out, and just concatenate those together using the / and asterisk to put it into a comment. And you'll notice there it's on separate lines. So if you hold down the Alt key in the middle of an Excel formula and press enter, it inserts a carriage return rather than moving to the next cell, which means that when you copy and paste all of your lovely comments and macro invocations into your SAS code editor, they'll appear on alternate lines, so that you don't need to go through and enter all of those carriage returns yourself. And that's it. And that's our macro that we would be given. So that's the macro that we've written that derives each one of our fields with the parameters that get taken in. So you can see from the macro there that what it's doing is it's creating a data set for each individual derived field that we're creating, but we're keeping subject ID and the field itself, and we're using the where clause to only extract those where we're interested in. So once we have our 1,000 data sets, we can then merge those together, and we end up with our big data set at the end, which has our 1,000 fields in, and we're done. So before I go into questions, actually, I would just like to say two things. So the example that I've given here is really, really simple, but I use Excel as a matter of course whenever I'm writing SAS code. It's basically if there is anything where I need to append